Tonight on The Late Debate, the former Tory leadership contender who set his sights on City Hall. Rory Stewart is in the studio to talk about abandoning the party to run for Mayor of London. Plus,
gone down twice.
For the second time in 10 weeks, a convicted terrorist on early release brings chaos to London. Can politicians keep us safe?
I wish I could assure the public that everybody who poses a risk on the streets could be subject to some sort of thing which would stop them being able to stab anybody ever, but it is clearly not possible.
Good evening. In exactly 3 months, Londoners will go to the polls once again. At stake, London's top job and the keys to City Hall. The surprise contender taking on Sadiq Khan wanted to be the leader of the Conservative Party just a few months ago. Now he's not even a member of the party. So who is Rory Stewart?
Have you met my friend Rory?
A decade ago, he was campaigning in a Cumbrian chip shop with the Prime Minister. But now the former MP for Penrith and the Border hopes to reinvent himself as a politician for London. Rory Stewart was Prisons Minister in Theresa May's government, where he promised to resign if he couldn't cut drug use and violence in Britain's jails within 12 months.
Unless I'm able to say, look, hold me accountable in a year, we're not going to make progress.
In his North of England constituency, he attempted to sell Mrs May's EU withdrawal agreement to voters.
This is either a festival of democracy or the stupidest decision I've ever made in my political career.
But when Mrs May was toppled by her party, Rory Stewart entered the contest to replace her. He admitted once smoking opium in Iran.
I was at a wedding where somebody passed around an opium pipe and I smoked some of that opium pipe.
In the hustings and debates, the unlikely challenger to Boris Johnson appeared to have momentum.
One of the reasons why I absolutely want to reject this push for no-deal Brexit and I absolutely want to reject the politics of Corbyn is I think the energy in this country is in the centre ground. If I were lucky enough to be your Prime Minister, I am
But after what he admitted was a lacklustre performance in one televised debate, Stewart's campaign fizzled out.
What I've discovered today is that my power base at the moment is not amongst the members of Parliament.
The ayes to the right, 329.
In October, he was among the Tory rebels who blocked the Prime Minister's Brexit plan and ended up losing the whip. But he hoped it wasn't the end of his career.
I intend to stand as a Conservative. I expect my party is going to come to its senses.
Instead, Rory Stewart has been on a one-man road trip around London, trying to generate enthusiasm for his new ambition, to be the next mayor. And Rory Stewart joins me now. Rory Stewart, you're a long way from the Lake District. What on earth makes you want to be Mayor of London?
I think it's the greatest city on earth, and there are some basic foundations we need to fix. We need to make London safe again, need to get the transport going. But I think on those foundations we have so much to be proud of here. And I cannot, for somebody
But why do you want to do it?
Well, because for somebody who likes helping people, I cannot think of a job where in politics you can get more done.
But not long ago you were trying to be Prime Minister. Why should London voters take you seriously? Is this just a vanity project?
I'm somebody who, throughout my life, has tried to help people by working from the grassroots up in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in my job in prisons. I'm not really somebody who flourished, I think, as a Member of Parliament, just standing, debating. I'm somebody...
You mean you were no good?
Yeah, I think I'm better at running things. I'm better at helping people through concrete details on the ground.
But what's your experience of running municipal government? You've never been a councillor, you've never stood in any ward, as far as I know, in London. What makes you qualified to run City Hall?
So I ran a province of nearly 3 million people in Iraq. I've run a complete reconstruction of the centre of the old city of Kabul, setting up a charity, rebuilding 160 houses, clearing 27,000 trucks of garbage, bringing millions of pounds of income back. I rebuilt a lot of the challenges in England and Wales in prisons, reduced violence there. And so I think, and I was the flooding minister, so I did a lot on floods. I think what I've shown through nearly 25 years in public service, starting as a young soldier and on, is that I'm somebody who likes getting things done and likes helping people by getting things done.
If you want this job, you've no doubt studied the politics of London. You'll know that this is very much a city divided along party lines. The most recent opinion poll puts Sadiq Khan on 45% share, Sean Bailey, the Conservative candidate, on about 23%. You're well behind. You can't win this, can you?
So you're right, that poll which came
I'm
out...
right, you can't win this?
No, you're right that poll which came out a week after I announced had me in at about 13%, but that's a pretty good place to enter a race. You're right, I'm the underdog. If you look at the betting odds, though, I'm second to Sadiq Khan. The other candidates are 20 to 1. I'm about 2 to 1. And that's because London is a second preference system. I'm an independent. I represent the centre ground. I've always been passionate for the belief that there is a gaping hole in the centre ground of British politics. People don't have to choose between these big old political parties. They want energy, action, getting things done. And because it's a second preference system, you get 2 preferences on your card. I would hope that even if I were to come second in the first round, I have a very good chance of winning this.
I'd like to ask you what your Achilles heel is, but before we do that, let's ask some of your contenders, your rivals, about what they think it might be.
The real issue here is, do we have slick career politicians who make lots of promises and deliver on nothing, not because they're wicked, but because they don't understand?
I don't think a former Conservative minister who failed even to be the Tory leader, I think he came 6th or 7th, is the right person to be the mayor of London.
The Tory candidates, both Sean and Rory, they oversaw a government that cut police numbers, that were behind austerity, that didn't change the problems that we see in our prison service.
They've all got a point, haven't they?
Absolutely, but I think the key thing is not to spend our time attacking each other.
This is a mayoral election, it's going to happen, that's a given.
It's about action. So I've got 3 questions for you. Do you feel safer than you did 4 years ago? Is your commute better than it was 4 years ago? And is your housing more affordable? Let's look at performance and let's try to choose the person who has the track record of doing things. And the question for all these candidates is just very simple. What have they done?
And you say that on performance you will not stand for a second term if you've not achieved your goals, and you'll resign if you haven't cut knife crime after 2 years. Can you do that in 2 years?
Yes, I can. I came into the prison system. Violence had tripled over 5 years. Many people said there was nothing that could be done to reduce it. I said I would resign unless I reduced violence in prison. Brought in a brigadier from the army, set up an ops room, worked with some amazing prison officers and governors,
so how are you going to do that with crime?
And we brought violence down by 16% in 7 months. In relation to London, I would take a very similar approach. I would triple the number of uniformed police on the streets. So at the moment in your ward in London, you probably have 1 or at most 2 officers. You should have a sergeant, 2 police constables, 3 PCSOs. They should be reinforced by teams of 10
going back
at
to
the borough
Ken
level.
Livingstone's neighbourhood policing plan.
Absolutely. Neighbourhood policing has been the foundation of the Metropolitan Police since the mid-19th century.
Do you think Ken Livingstone got it right?
All from Robert Peel to Ken Livingstone to the mayors of New York, everybody has always known, and the great John Stevens, who was our great Commissioner Met, the way that you reduce street crime is with uniformed police on the streets. You need that for the information, for the community relations. Once you've got that right, you can do an enormous amount. And the problem is it hasn't been done. If I were mayor, I would do it. I wouldn't blame anyone else. I would say I will resign unless I do it, and I will reduce it.
You will need the cooperation of the government. You will need Boris Johnson to sign the cheques for you to hire all those police officers. After the way you and Boris Johnson fell out last year, do you think he's going to cooperate with you?
So firstly, I would work very closely with anyone. The great thing
You'll
about
work
being
with Boris Johnson even though you wouldn't be in his government?
Great thing about being an independent is I will work with Labour boroughs, I'll work with Conservative boroughs, I'll work with a Conservative government. But I just want to pull you up on one point. It's not true that the police only come from the central government. If the mayor wanted to, he could have put 1,000 extra police on the streets any time in the last 3 years. That was a choice from the mayor. Remember, the mayor is the Police and Crime Commissioner for London.
Well, the mayor is increasing policing. He's put up the council tax to do that.
Yeah, so why didn't he do that last year? Or the year before, the year before that? He did that, I noticed, as soon as I announced I wanted to triple the number of police on the streets. He immediately decided that perhaps he could do it, having spent 3 years saying, for some reason, that he couldn't. So we need a mayor who takes responsibility, who grips the situation, who uses the money and resources, who understands that the Mayor of London has a budget of about £17 billion a year. You can do a lot with that. I can make you safer, we can make your housing more affordable, and we can make sure that your commute is better.
Who's paying for your campaign? It's costing a lot of money. Who's paying for you? Who's paying for your staff?
So I give speeches and I do a bit of consulting. I write books. So I've written...
So you're fundraising your entire campaign and the staff?
I've written 4 different types of books, and then I get donations. So we've got, I think, a few hundred people coming in, from small donations to big donations. All of that will be published, like the other candidates, in accordance with the electoral rules.
Do you have any conscience about what you're doing to your former party, to Sean Bailey, who has won the Tory nomination?
I hope I have a conscience like anybody, but I think the important thing here is that people in London get to choose who they want. This isn't about party loyalty, it's about the future of London. There's just a very, very simple question. Who do you think can run the city better? Who can run the city better? Who can make you safer? Who has a police plan that works? Who's actually run things before? You know, I'm the only candidate in this race who was a Secretary of State in the Cabinet. I was a member of the National Security Council. I've managed budgets bigger than this before. So this is a role that I have the experience, and it's about experience, action and grip.
Rory Stewart, thank you for coming in this evening. Now, to one of the major challenges confronting whoever becomes London's next mayor, terrorism. On Sunday, police shot dead another terrorist who was intent on killing Londoners. And it turned out, once again, he was a recent graduate of the criminal justice system. Sudesh Aman was the second convicted terrorist to go on the rampage in London after being let out of prison early. The second convicted terrorist to be shot dead by police in the space of just 10 weeks. This mobile phone footage shows the armed undercover officers. They were following Aman when he stole a knife in a shop in Streatham and attacked 2 people. And it prompted this question from a Labour politician.
If he was the subject of an intensive police operation, and one newspaper headline, I believe it was the Daily Mail, said he was being followed by up to 20 officers, then how then did he manage to stab 2 people? Was this attack preventable at all?
But the Commissioner said those were questions for the official inquiries.
I wish I could assure the public that everybody who poses a risk on the streets could be subject to some sort of thing which would stop them being able to stab anybody ever, but it is clearly not possible.
Sudesh Aman was freed from prison after serving just half his sentence. The government's response was to change the rules to end the automatic early release of terrorists.
Mr. Speaker, this appalling incident makes plain the case for immediate action, and we will shortly introduce emergency legislation to make sure that we do everything to protect the public.
But the attack also prompted calls for more money to be spent on programmes to de-radicalise prisoners.
But the key thing is people should not come out of prison more dangerous than when they went in. So we absolutely have to have investment as well in our prisons to make sure that proper, effective rehabilitation takes place.
Once again, Londoners have been reminded of the threat from individuals willing to die for their cause. Joining me now to discuss that and other issues affecting the capital are 3 new MPs. The Labour MP for Streatham, Bel Ribeiro Addy. For the Conservatives, the Beaconsfield MP Joy Morrissey, and for the Liberal Democrats, the Twickenham MP Munira Wilson. Welcome all of you. Bel, your constituency at the centre of what happened at the weekend, 4 days on. What are people in Streatham saying?
Well, obviously it was quite a shock to everybody. I think people are just grateful that the 2 individuals that were harmed are going to make a completely full recovery. That's definitely the most important thing. But obviously it's a very strange thing to happen in what is essentially a suburb of London, and they're asking questions as to why somebody so dangerous was allowed back onto our streets.
It's the second time the police have been forced to shoot dead a terrorist who until recently was behind bars. Perhaps it would have been better for everyone concerned, including the terrorists, if they were still behind bars.
Yes, it definitely would have been. I mean, it would have been better for myself. I hear that he had intentions on killing an MP and he was placed in my constituency. So that's quite shocking to hear. I think the people of Streatham can't understand why somebody so dangerous was put so close to schools, to homes. Usually it's something that people are informed about, but it's a very, very strange situation, especially when that many armed police...
Because he was in a bail hostel, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was in a bail hostel. And people aren't aware of the bail hostel. They aren't aware of the crimes that people have committed before they go into the bail hostel. And, you know, they also can't fathom how somebody who required that many armed officers to follow them was allowed back out on the streets.
And as you say, particularly shocking when you hear that he was actually intent on killing an MP.
Yeah.
Joy, does this not raise the question, though, that something's going wrong in prison? Is this about rehabilitation? That's where the answer lies, isn't it? Not necessarily keeping them locked up.
I think it's a combination of measures, and we are looking at emergency measures of what we're going to investigate and look at, but also introducing this new emergency legislation I think will help with not allowing people out of prison before they've served their full sentence if they've been engaged in an act of terrorism or planning an act of terrorism. And I think we do need to look at how we de-radicalize people in prisons and how we offer more employment support and breaking the cycle of reoffending.
That's going to cost more money, though.
Well, there's other things that I think we can do. But for the issue of terrorism and planning acts of terrorism, I think this emergency legislation is very welcomed. I think we were all outraged, and it's terrifying to hear that he might have gone after an MP. So,
Munira, will the Lib Dems back the emergency legislation?
Well, we've yet to see the detail of the legislation, but in principle, we agree that those who are convicted of terrorist offences shouldn't necessarily be allowed out automatically after serving only half of their sentence. They need to be properly reviewed by parole boards and assessed in terms of their risk to the public. And it's quite clear this individual almost certainly shouldn't have been allowed out. So I think the principle is right. We need to look at the details. But I'd reiterate what Siobhan Benita, the Lib Dem mayoral candidate, said on that video. We need to be investing much more in de-radicalisation and rehabilitation in prisons, because even if these people stay in longer, at the end of the day, they're going to be let out one day, and we need to be doing much more to de-radicalise them. And part of the problem is our prisons are massively overcrowded, often with people who've committed minor offences for very short sentences. Actually, if we take those people out of prison and keep some of these people in for longer and invest more in terms of de-radicalisation and rehabilitation, then hopefully our streets will be safer.
Belle, what is the answer in prisons? I should say at this point that you worked for a long time for Diane Abbott, who's the Shadow Home Secretary, so you've got a bit of an insight into the issues.
Yes, and people appear to be becoming more radicalised in prisons. We do need to look at that. I completely agree. And I'm pleased to see that the Conservative Party, the government, have now taken on board the review of the PREVENT programme. The PREVENT has clearly failed to prevent certain things occurring on our streets, and it's important that we have a preventative anti-terror programme that works, that doesn't alienate communities, that works properly with them to help identify who might be at risk, and actually takes proper steps, fully funded steps, fully resourced steps to rehabilitate people properly so they don't go out to commit these offences again.
Do you all agree that in this case, and with Usman Khan at Fishmongers Hall, the police had no choice but to shoot the terrorists? But it is presumably unfortunate that it ever gets to this.
I know that there are a lot of young people in my constituency who were out that day, who saw what happened and who are quite traumatised and appalled by it. They're asking questions because, you know, they've been quite good in the Lambeth schools about going around and speaking to people and finding out how they're doing and providing resources in that way. And obviously they're quite shocked to have watched someone be shot. That's quite traumatic for them. If that's the action that needed to be taken, then fine. But anything to avoid, well, that happening to someone, actually having to have people witness it.
Joy, can I just touch on the business of keeping them locked up, the ending of automatic release? I mean, presumably one of the incentives to rehabilitation is the idea that you will get out at the end of the sentence. And now if people convicted of terrorism are finding that they may not be able to get their freedom when they expected it, that's not going to de-radicalise them, is it?
But I think we need to look at, I mean, the current system where you can automatically be released without any, even if the parole board said that you shouldn't be, there's no, it was just sort of they were released, and this automatic release is what we really need to look at, particularly for people who've been plotting acts of terrorism or involved in terrorist attacks. I think we really do need to look strongly at this. And this is not for all, this is not a measure for everyone. This is just a measure for people who were engaged in acts of terrorism. I think there's a special case for that.
You presumably have concerns about the civil liberties here.
Well, as I said before, these people shouldn't be allowed out automatically without assessment, and they also ought to be separated from others who've committed terrorist offences, because quite often they're becoming more dangerous when they're in prison, and that comes back to my point about overcrowding. So that's where we need to be investing time and resource and money.
Munira, I want to talk to you about something else. You, unusually, as a new MP, has been given a portfolio. Your two portfolios, transport being one of them. Yes. We're expecting a decision this month on HS2.
Yeah.
Where are the Lib Dems on HS2?
Well, we want to cut our carbon emissions by reducing flying, and that includes domestic flights, and trying to move people onto the railways. So we do think we need HS2 largely to free up more capacity on our network. So we have always supported HS2. However, we do have concerns about the ballooning costs, and we can't just write a blank cheque to HS2. And part of the problem with that is the lack of transparency, accountability and the governance around HS2, and We've seen the same with Crossrail, actually, here in London, which has been delayed.
Joy, HS2 cuts into your constituency,
It does,
and so you are
so
going to be
I
a
am
Tory
against.
rebel on HS2.
Well, for the people of Denham, it does have a really negative impact, and the environmental impact. We have a natural aquifer that flows through that actually HS2 could destroy and pollute the natural water that we have. But really, the people of Denham have received no compensation from HS2, and there hasn't been any kind of just help with, and we don't get anything sort of in the London sort of TfL, Mara. We're outside of that zone, so we get everything negative without any funding or compensation. So I'm really speaking for the people of Denham that absolutely get no benefit at all.
Belle, Labour gave birth to HS2.
They did, and then they're for it. But I'm committed to be one of those politicians that doesn't speak for the sake of speaking. I absolutely agree with Munira, so there's no need to add anything additional there.
Okay.
It doesn't need to cost so much.
Let me
so
ask you one final point. All new MPs, what are your impressions? What surprised you? Joy, I mean, you walked through the Palace of Westminster doors for the first time.
It was incredible. I think you think you know what it's going to be like, and it's such an honor. And I was just so humbled by walking through the chamber for the first time and taking the oath, and it was a really, for me, humbling experience.
Anything you don't like about it?
I think a lot of the antiquated processes and language, which are really difficult to engage with, both as a new MP and for the public out there who we're meant to be representing and serving, and all sorts of rules. I mean, I'm terrified about just having a drink of water in the chamber when I've been sitting there for 3 hours and I'm feeling quite warm, because you're not technically meant to take a bottle of water in. It's absurd.
Oh, I think that rule's changed.
I did
get a slight look when I pulled up my bright pink flask.
I was told they'll turn a blind eye to it, but having to drink from a bottle of water surreptitiously does seem a bit absurd to me.
You're all women. The more women, are you going to be able to help change things?
I think so.
Well, I'm delighted that there are more women, and I'm sorry to see actually there's so few women in the Conservative Party. That you're less than a quarter. I know you're there, and it's great to see you there. But given that you're the majority party, only a quarter or less than a quarter of your MPs. Whereas it's great to see that more than half the Labour MPs are women, and obviously over half of us in the Lib Dems are women. But SNP as well haven't got a very good balance.
Munira, Joy, Belle, I'm afraid we've run out of time, but thank you very much indeed for coming in to talk to us this evening. Thank you to all my guests tonight, to Rory, Belle, Joy and Munira. I'll be back next month. Until then, thank you for watching and good night. Thank you.